most important parts of a speech. They talk about the opening and the closing, but to me one of the most important parts of any speech is the title. Probably, in my mind, half of you probably are here just so you can hear what it is that Dan Schroff is going to talk about in his speech. He's also in my debate club, so he's quite a clever gentleman, but I don't know what in the world he's going to do with the speech titled 10 Goat Wives. 10 Goat Wives, Dan Schroff.
Johnny Oot was one of the best traders in his island chain. In fact, of the almost 100 islands, there was nobody who was a better trader than Johnny Oot. He always got the best deal, and nobody could ever pull one over on Johnny Oot. And he had spent his time on those islands building a trade route among all of the almost 100 islands, but his final goal was to go to the Grand Island where King Mo lived, because he was going to establish trade with King Mo. And finally that day came, and Johnny's canoes started to pull into King Mo's lagoon. And when they did, King Mo's men went up to him and told him, Johnny Oot is here. Now King Mo was looking forward to this, because he also was a really good trader. And he was thought that he could actually outdo Johnny Oot. So he came out onto his front porch, his two daughters with him, his twin daughters. Now, they were twins really only in the fact that they were born together, because the king loved his daughter Lila. She was beautiful, sophisticated, intelligent, spoke eloquently. And then there was the mouse, Anna. Not quite so intelligent, didn't really keep herself up, not exactly beautiful, and she spoke with a really bad stutter. So when the king saw that Johnny was starting to walk up towards them, he turned to Anna and said, please go into the kitchen and help them prepare the dinner. And of course, Anna bowed her head and went over to the kitchen door. And as Johnny made it up to the top of the steps, he bowed towards the king. And when he did, he looked over. And his eyes and Anna's eyes met. And she blushed like a little girl and ran inside the door and closed it behind her and put her ear to the door because she wanted to hear what this famous Johnny sounded like. And then King said, welcome to my island, Johnny. And Johnny looked up to him and he said, the girl. And King Mo said, oh, you want to get right to business? Well, this is my daughter, Lila. And Johnny said, no, the one that just went into the building. Who is she? And the king went, and he kind of sighed, knowing he's now going to have to tell Johnny that that also was his daughter. And he said, that's my other daughter, Anna. And Johnny just looked at him and he said, is she spoken for? You know, what is her price? Because on the islands, when a suitor was looking for a wife, they always offered the father a gift. Usually the commoners would give a goat for a wife. If it was one of the princes of one of the islands, possibly 2 goats, because that was the currency of the islands. Now, a king's daughter, she's probably going to get 3 goats. Easily 3. And the king just went, don't you mean my daughter Lila here? And Johnny said, no, your daughter Anna. I'll give you 5 goats. And the king was rather shocked, and he stepped back and he went, 5 goats? And Johnny said, you're right. That's way too low. I'll give you 7 goats. And of course, Anna is hearing all this through the door, wondering what is going on. But the king, when Johnny said 7 goats, started thinking, Johnny's trying to pull a fast one on me. He's trying to make fun of me. And he got mad and he said, 7 goats? How dare you try and say 7 goats? And Johnny went, I'll give you 10 goats. 10 goats and 10 baskets of fruit. The king said, I'll call your bluff. And Johnny paid the 10 goats. He had his men bring him to the king's corral. He brought in the fruits. And later that day, Johnny and Anna sailed off back towards Johnny's island. Now time passed, and for the first year, the other islanders had a good laugh and a good joke about how the king really stuck it to Johnny. 10 goats for a wife? Nobody in the islands has ever paid more than 3 goats. And they had their laugh. And then a couple years later, the king finally married off his daughter Lila to the slug. And later on, 10 years, another canoe pulled into the king's lagoon. And he handed him an invitation to a banquet in honor of Johnny on his island. And the king accepted, told him how many people would come. And the day of the banquet came, and all of the islanders were there. And finally Johnny came out, called them all inside, because the king had finally arrived. And when all the rest of the islanders and their families had sat down, the king came in, and a few people clapped and applauded. Yeah, I mean, they liked the king. And the king went up to the head table and sat down where Johnny was with his daughter and the slug and their kids. And then the door in the back opened again. And the most beautiful woman anybody had ever seen walked into the door. And the place went silent. She was radiant. She walked up to the head table and she addressed the king and said, "Welcome to Johnny's retirement celebration, King Mo and Lila." And then she turned to the crowd and told them the same. "Welcome to Johnny Oot's retirement party. Thank you for coming." And then she turned back around and the king kind of elbowed Johnny and said, "I like who you picked for your master of ceremonies." And that's when Johnny put out his left hand. Gotta learn my left and right. Left hand. She put out her left hand on top of his, and the king noticed matching wedding rings. And that's when the king looked at Johnny, his jaw dropping, and said, "What? What happened?" And the beautiful woman turned to the king and said, "Welcome to the island, Father and Sister Lila." And the king is like, "I don't get it. She was a mouse." And Johnny said, "King, when I first saw Anna, I knew that you had twin daughters. I also, as soon as I looked in her eyes, knew which one was the more beautiful. And from that day on, I wanted her to hear that she was a 10-goat wife, the first and only one ever on the islands. And she became a 10-goat wife. You see, you laughed that I paid 10, but I laughed because I got a bargain." Fellow Toastmasters, when you talk to your spouses and your children, remember that your words are more powerful than anything that you can give them. Your spouses, your children will become exactly what you tell them they are.